Welcome to the Holistic Health Bites podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Nicholson, crime scene investigator turned functional health investigator. This podcast is here to share bite-sized episodes and unique interviews on a wide variety of health topics to empower, enlighten, and educate you to live your best, most vibrant life. Disclaimer: all information you hear on this podcast is for information only and constitutes individual opinions of the person speaking. This should not be taken as medical advice. Being a listener of this show does not initiate a practitioner-client relationship between you and the hosts or panelists on this show. Please discuss these topics with your medical professionals before making any changes to your health. Okay, let's dive in. Welcome back to the Holistic Health Bites podcast. Today, I am joined by a fellow coach and nutrition and weight loss expert, Lisa Goldberg. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just do a quick introduction, tell everybody about you and kind of how you got into this space.
Okay, yeah, sure. Lisa Goldberg, and as Andrew just said, I'm a nutritionist and weight loss expert. And I've been doing this work. I coach on habit, behavior, and mindset change. And I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And I truly believe that it's the piece that most people don't pay attention to when it comes to losing weight. So they focus on changing the food, but they don't focus on changing what got them to need to lose weight in the first place. And so what really got me into exploring this further, when I first got my master's degree and I started seeing clients, I felt like, and most of my clients who I saw came to me for weight loss. And so towards the end of our conversation and our consultation, I felt like everybody was asking me the same question. And that question was, what can I have after dinner? And I'm just like, well, you just ate dinner. How could you be hungry? Like, why do you need to want something more to eat? And so I began to explore mindset, habit and behavior change, emotional eating, to really kind of understand why people yo-yo dieted, right? It's not like the clients who came to see me had never lost weight before, but they always lost weight and gained it back. And then they were trying to figure out, well, now how do I lose it again? And that's when I realized it's not that they don't know what healthy eating looks like. There's just something more that needed to change in order to lose weight and not gain it back again.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about, why is it that the way we approach dieting or diets in general, why is it that they are so hard to stick with? Or, why is it that they just really don't work?
Well, I kind of really believe that from the time people learned about dieting, right? Especially, 20, 30, 40 years ago, to go on a diet was to cut something out, right? We were all taught to cut out the sweets, to cut out the carbs, to cut out the wine. It was all about what we shouldn't be eating, which once you cut those things out, what you really have is a reduced calorie or a very low fat, low calorie diet. So anybody who reduces their fat and reduces their calories is going to lose weight. But nobody actually was exploring, well, what got me to be overweight to begin with? And what's a realistic way to lose weight? Because it's not realistic to never eat those foods again. I mean, some people might, but it's not what the majority of the population can live with, to never have bread, to never have a cookie. And nobody really explored their emotional relationship with food. And I think any diet that you go on, you'll lose the weight. But if it's not in a sustainable way, the weight will never stay off. And you also need to explore, well, what caused me? Because there's a cause and effect. We're eating too much food. We're eating when we're not hungry is a big part of why people gain weight, right? There are people, I don't want to take this away, metabolically, right? Some people do have some metabolic things that need to be addressed. But for most people, it's overconsumption and eating when you're not hungry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so what do you think is behind that? Is it purely just a mindset thing? Is it a misunderstanding of what foods really are? Like, what is it that's driving the overconsumption?
Well, I think it's the way our brains are wired when we're young. So for a lot of the people that I've worked with, they either have a scarcity mindset, right? Food was either, scarce in their house growing up, or they were deprived of something. There's a lot of households where they don't have anything sweet and they have no cookies. Or, kids are told, and they still are, clean your plate. And then you could get dessert. Like dessert was held up, the sugary stuff was held up as like this prize to get as long as you eat food and finish your plate. But when kids are taught to clean their plate, they're taught to overfeed their bodies, right? So now your brain has this habit and it recognizes being really full or overstuffed as when you're done. And you're also taught the message is now there's this prize, it's a reward at the end of that meal for over consuming. And there's all these messages, and for the household where there was foods that were restricted, and then that child went to a friend's house and overate the food there. And that's where I believe that a lot of people learn how to sneak eat, right? They'll take something into their room and they'll eat it when nobody's watching, because I work with a lot of 50, 60, and 70-year-old women who still do that, right? They don't want to be seen. So, and the only person now they're hiding from is themselves, but it's the way their brain is wired for the belief, for the habit and the behavior. And so that's why a diet will never work, because until you address the beliefs that you have around food, I need to clean my plate, right? It's wasteful if I don't eat all of the food. There are children starving somewhere in the world, so therefore I should clean my plate and learn how to overfeed my body. And so that becomes the wired in habit. And until you actually learn how to recognize the habits and recognize the thinking, right? Because our actions follow our thoughts. That's the stuff that I believe really needs to change, because that's the stuff that never changes every time somebody tries to lose weight.
Yeah. And so many people I see in my practice are, like you said, overindulging. They're overeating, they're overconsuming, they're getting way more food than they actually need. But when you really look at their foods, they're not even real foods. And that's why I see so many people overindulging, because they're not actually getting nourished. They're undernourished while being overfed. And so I think if you can transition more into eating real food, a lot of that drive to keep eating can go away. Now, of course, there are mindsets and habits and other things that play into that, but the biological drive to keep eating does get better if you're eating real foods. And sadly, the vast majority of what we see in grocery stores and restaurants today isn't real food. It's highly processed, ultra processed, loaded with chemicals and preservatives and just all the things. So from your perspective, what kinds of things do you see in like food choices that people are making?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like the food manufacturers actually know what to do to make these foods not just highly processed, but highly addictive,
Yeah.
right? They've actually done studies on how these foods light up people's brains, like that dopamine hit, to keep them wanting more. But I truly believe, and I've seen it with my clients, that if you're physically hungry, which is another reason why people overeat and overindulge, is because they're not even in tune with their
Yeah.
true physical hunger. So let me start by saying, if you're physically hungry, those processed things like something sweet or crunchy like chips or crackers, it's not going to satiate the hunger. It's going to keep you wanting more, which is why, think about it. How many times, if you're somebody who overindulges or overeats or can't lose weight, do you eat something and it doesn't ring the bell but it's not filling you up and nourishing you. So it's like, I just need one more thing. I just need one more thing. And you keep looking for that one more thing. So I think part of the reason why people overeat is because if you are eating these processed foods, but oftentimes people have the belief that these are the foods that are going to make you happy, that these are the foods that you deserve for, and this is what I call the dieter's mindset, right? Like a lot of people who emotionally eat and yo-yo diet for many years have what I call the dieter's mindset. It's this black and white way of thinking. So you feed yourself well in the earlier part of the day. And so somehow you believe that you deserve a food reward for eating healthy, and then you reward yourself with this unhealthy thing. And then what do? You beat yourself up, because if weight loss is really your goal, right? You're upset with yourself. Why did I do that? I was healthy all day. But if you think about it, your dieter's mindset, your way of thinking is wired to believe that you deserve the reward. Hence, there's the habit, the behavior, the pattern. If you're trying to lose weight, notice the pattern of you feed yourself well, you get home at a certain hour of the day, and then the thought is, well, I did well all day. You don't even use the word well. You think I was good all day, right? That's how a dieter thinks to themselves. I was good all day, so therefore I deserve, or I get to eat this thing. And then your perfectionist mindset thinks, well, I blew it. I may as well keep on eating. And so there's a cycle, right? There's why weight loss is so hard for so many people, because of their way of thinking, right? So I always say the missing piece to lasting weight loss is the fact that you're not changing that thinking, that dieter's mindset.
Yeah. And I see the same thing happen with exercise too. Oh, I did a great workout today, so I can eat more.
Yes.
Even if you're eating the best quality, most nutritious foods ever, you can still overindulge. And so, yeah, we really have to get out of this mindset of using food as a reward, as using it as the prize for accomplishing whatever that is, either being good all day or getting a good workout in or whatever that may be. That mindset is difficult to overcome. So, do you have advice that you give your clients on how to kind of break that reward cycle?
Yeah, well, first I have a little saying. I mean, I always say puppies get rewarded with food, not people, right? Which is the truth.
Yeah.
Food is not a reward.
Yeah.
And so I first start to get my clients' mindset wrapped around food is in abundance, right? For most people, food is in abundance, it's not scarce. And the food that you view as being the reward is unhealthy. And it's actually what's keeping you overweight or preventing you from losing weight or getting you to regain the weight that you've worked so hard to lose. So, where is the reward? Right? That's the mindset that needs to shift. And I also think it's really important that people get in touch with their true physical hunger.
Yes. Big one.
Because, right? So if you have an amazing workout, you don't want to replace those calories you're not physically hungry for, just because you did a workout. So, but I think a lot of it is misinformation that, you have to be. I also, in addition to being a nutritionist, I spent 20 years as a personal trainer. So, so many people think they need to eat and replace the calories that they've lost. But unless you're working out for 90 minutes or more, you don't really need to, eat like a ton of protein and carbohydrates after your workout. If you're doing like a 40-minute spin class or, getting on the treadmill for a half an hour, right? That's just misinformation that I want people to know about. If you're a triathlete, or if you're somebody who's working out for 2 hours a day, well, then maybe yes, depending upon what your workout is. But there's the mindset of overfeeding and noticing when you're eating, when you're not hungry. And what I do for my clients for the mindset is I get them to tap into, am I hungry? Notice the words that you're using. If you're saying something like, I think I feel like, or I'm in the mood for, it tells me you are not hungry. And so notice the words that you're using and what you're thinking, because a lot of people think about eating and they feed that, but it's
Yeah.
not full hunger.
Yeah. And I would say if you're craving something specific, that's a craving. That's an emotional drive.
Yeah.
But if you're like, no, I could sit down and eat a full, like meat, vegetables, like full meal, even if it's a small meal, if I would eat a plate of regular meal food, then you probably are physically hungry. But if you're like, oh, I really want that protein shake, or I really want that apple and peanut butter, or I really like, if you have a specific thing and you would say no to pretty much everything else, that's emotion for sure.
Or it's habit,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Out of habit. Think about it. It's the time of day. right?
Yep.
I call it the bewitching hour between like that 3 to 5 p.m., like after lunch before dinner, right? The I think I feel like. So notice the words, because I think when people are hungry, it's more of a declaration.
Yeah.
I'm hungry. We feel physical hunger in our bodies. And so a lot of the work is to pay attention and or get reacquainted because so many people graze or eat all day long that they don't even know what physical hunger feels like anymore.
And you can create those physical sensations in your body just because of your routines. I used to be that way when I ate every 2 to 3 hours from 5 a.m. until 8 p.m. I could tell you what time of day it was based on my body's signals telling me I was hungry. But I didn't actually need nourishment 18 times a day.
Right.
But I had trained my body to tell me I was hungry all day long because I was eating all day long. And so when I broke that habit and got to where I could really tell true physical hunger, I don't need to eat that many times. And now I don't even think about food. It's like, oh, I guess I haven't eaten today. Like, I mean, obviously I do eat every day, but it's not 18 times a day. It's not all day thinking about food and packing snacks and taking food with me everywhere and worrying about how am I going to do this when I've got this meeting and I've got this thing and I'll be on a plane. And it's like, no, now I'm fine. I know when I'm truly physically hungry and I know what to do about it when that happens, but it's not a constant obsession anymore.
Yeah, well, that's a big thing too. People are afraid of
Yeah.
being hungry. I call it preemptive eating. So the way you were packing your snacks, like what if, right? The thought was, if you think
Hmm.
about your thought, what if I get hungry? What if I'm in the meeting or on the plane and I don't have food? And part of it is, well, what if you do,
Right.
right? Hunger might be uncomfortable, but nobody's gonna, unless you don't eat for days and weeks on end,
Right.
it's for those, 4 hours or 6 hours, nothing's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
There's a cause of discomfort, but again, based on your experience from the past, because there are people who didn't have access to food, right? Maybe growing up, they were in a scarce situation. And so their fear is feeling that hunger. But that's just the way their brain is wired, right? They're wired for the habit and behavior. But it's about checking in with what's your reality now, right? What's your true story now? Are you still in that situation that you might have been when you were growing up? Or do you have access being, an adult that you can access food? But it's like this logical thinking that needs to take over as opposed to what I refer to as your rabbit hole voice, the old wired in thinking that gets you to believe that you're hungry or something bad is going to happen if you feel the hunger or you don't eat for a certain period of time.
Yeah. And I think sadly, there's a lot in the health space that will tell you you need to be eating every 2 hours. That's still a really common message from personal trainers and some nutritionists and dietitians, lots of doctors, lots of magazines, lots of social media influencers will tell you that that's the best thing you can do for your metabolism. But can you explain a little bit about why that isn't necessarily the right thing to do?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do. And I understand the thinking, like you keep giving a little bit of fuel because when we eat that first meal of the day, because I'm a big believer in eating something for breakfast, whether it's at 7 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning, depending upon what time your day starts, it's when we eat and when we're digesting, our metabolism start to kick in to digest that food. So I understand the theory of feeding your body all day long, but there that tends to be overfeeding because most people don't know what 100 to 200 calories look like if you're going to feed yourself so many times a day. But it also gets you out of touch with your true physical sensations. It also creates a fear-based mentality, I think, about being hungry. And I just think most people's lives, like if you're an athlete and your life revolves around fitness and nutrition, maybe that's the right way for you to go. But most people who have busy lives, most women who have families and careers, and most men who have families and careers and have like these busy lives, it's not realistic to feed your body that way and think it's maintainable and sustainable. And so it's really about finding out what works in your life. And for most people, eating 3 meals a day, and depending upon the length of your day, maybe 1 or 2 snacks during the day. So there's not this big gap of time because, if you're going for more than, 5, 6, or 7 hours after your meal, before you could get to your next meal, you could potentially feel physical hunger. And so I'm a big believer in feeding the hunger, right? Not just eating for eating sake.
Yeah.
And so I kind of think that's where people get so confused. They try to, follow these dogmas that just don't fit realistically into their lives.
Yeah, for sure. I see three reasons why people struggle more when they're eating too often. And one is that obsession. I know that was true for me. I was constantly thinking about food and where I was going to get my food. And like while eating, I'm thinking about the next time I'm going to eat. Like that's not a healthy place to be, even if you're eating entirely healthy foods. So I think the obsession is definitely not helpful. Like you said, losing touch with your physical sensations, all of those kinds of things. Two, I think it really actually disrupts your digestion. We have a migrating motor complex that can only operate every 90 minutes when you're not eating. So if you're eating every 2 hours, you literally can't sweep your digestion appropriately. You're stopping all of those things from working appropriately. And third is you're getting an insulin spike every single time you eat. And if you're constantly raising your insulin, it never comes back down to baseline. And when your insulin is elevated, you're in fat storage mode. You cannot break down stored fuels if you're constantly eating. And that makes sense. Why would you be pulling food out of storage while adding to storage? It just doesn't even make sense. Biologically, of course, you're going to be in one mode or the other. And so if you're constantly eating, you're constantly storing, which is just going to make weight loss that much harder. It's going to propagate the hunger. It's going to keep all those cravings going. It's going to keep the mindset going, and it's furthering the habit. So I definitely agree with you. Eating far less often is better. I find that most people actually don't really need snacks at all. Obviously, if they're working a 16-hour day, maybe because that's a really long day. So like you said, we don't want to go too long between meals and then end up overeating because we got famished. So I do think
Exactly.
there's a sweet spot there. But I find most people do pretty well if they're eating good quality foods, well-rounded meals, appropriately created meals that are filling and satiating without being overstuffed, then people don't need snacks. They're perfectly fine with 2 to 3 meals a day, and they have all the energy, all the mental clarity, all the physical strength that they need.
Yeah, well, I mean, each individual person is different.
Of course,
And again, I believe it really depends on what time your day starts and what time your day ends. And you said something that is correct. A lot of people, when they feel hunger, right, and they wait too long to eat, when you do get to the next meal, a lot of people have a propensity to overeat because in that moment, it feels like there's not enough food and you can't eat fast enough to get rid of that uncomfortable, hungry feeling. So I try to coach my clients to not let themselves get to that point because they eat too fast and they eat too much. And then especially if they struggle with emotional eating, then they beat themselves up for doing that. So we try
for
to
sure.
prevent that cycle. But the truth is I also coach my clients on protein and carbs at all of your meals and snacks if you're eating snacks, because that is the way to keep your insulin from having these sharp spikes by having the protein and the good quality protein at all of your meals. It'll keep you satiated. Like you said, it'll curb those cravings. And I believe cravings, like we discussed earlier, is more of a thought than a physiological sensation.
Yeah, for sure. I think so much of our habits and routines and the way we approach food, exercise, lifestyle, all the things is really what's going on in our brains. It's
Yes.
it's really all the emotional things and all the past stories and all of the beliefs about what we have to do to be whatever it is that we're desiring to be. And so much of it is really a brain game. It's not a physical sensation issue. It's really more of a mindset thing for sure.
Yeah, it actually is a brain game. It's like 100% a brain game, to be quite honest, because it's the process to change any habits and behaviors is about changing your brain, changing the way you think, right? Because our thoughts create our actions, right? So whatever we think, we do. That's saying whatever what you think you become, right? And so, and whatever you say to yourself the most is what becomes your belief, right? So for anybody who thinks I can't lose weight, I'll never be able to lose weight, it's too hard to lose weight, well, that's what you're going to get more of, because you keep telling that to yourself. It's what you actually believe to be true. So then your actions form into backing up your beliefs,
Yeah.
right? So it's all about your brain. It starts with how we think, is how we do everything.
Yeah. It's also what we spend our time doing, who we spend our time with, what we spend our time thinking about. It's, we become like the five people we spend the most time with. And I would add into that, it's not just the people you spend the most time with in person, but who are you listening to? What are you watching? All of these things. If you're constantly surrounded by people who go to fast food every day, people who go to happy hours frequently, people who, don't work out or don't sleep appropriately, or like if you're around all of these influences and you're watching negative things on TV and you're watching, just all these things, if you're watching and listening to things, they're making an influence on you as well. So really pay attention to all of those influences in your life, in addition to the stories you're telling yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the truth. It's really important to, know what you're taking in, and really just paying attention to asking yourself, what do you want? How do you want to feel? What kind of energy do you want to have? Right? What kind of life do you want to live? Right? How do you want to look and feel when you see yourself in the mirror? Right? And then you've got to actually take the action steps, because we could want all of these things that we want. But if we're not actually doing and being in action to get what we say we want, we're just always going to be wishing for these things,
Yeah.
right? It's about the doing part, not just for anybody who says, I should be, or I know I have to,
Yeah.
that just keeps you where you are.
Yeah. And I think another thing is we also don't need to jump to the end point day one. It is actually way easier, way more sustainable, and more likely to actually be successful if you transition slowly. If you're someone who doesn't work out now, who eats nothing but fast food now, who like has all of the boxes checked that we don't want checked, it's not going to work for you to join a gym, start eating nothing but salads all day long, go to bed at 10 p.m., like, to just 180, 100% of your life. That's a recipe for immediate disaster. You're going to
Yeah,
feel miserable. You're going to hate your life. You're going to hate everything about it. You're going to constantly be thinking about all the things you used to have. You're going to feel deprived and restricted and miserable. And it's a recipe for disaster. So it's okay to baby step into these things. Look at it as this long-term journey. Health doesn't have a destination.
right. Yeah,
It's,
I totally agree with you. I mean, part of the problem, especially when it comes to those who want weight loss, is they want it yesterday.
yeah,
Right? And they don't take the time and the patience with themselves to go slow, right? Because they just, they want to get the weight off. But sustainable change, because here's the thing, the more you're consistent, change is about consistency. The more you're consistent at making the changes and you repeat that over and over and over again, that's how it becomes your new habit, right? And your new pattern. So it's better to go slow, but be consistent and change what you could change. And just remember, change is hard, and your brain, it's easier for your brain to think the old way than to think in the new way, which is why people don't stay consistent long enough when it comes to weight loss. So it's worth making the effort for yourself. And it might feel hard initially, but after you practice, because anything you want to get good at takes practice. Once you're consistent and you're practicing and you're getting better, it's because your brain is actually changing its wiring. So be kind and patient with yourself on this journey.
Yeah. And it may feel like if you're taking small enough steps, it may feel like you're not making any progress at all. And so that again comes back to the mindset that you have to pay attention to the behaviors, not the outcomes. Because if you're making a baby step, maybe you switch from regular to diet soda, like that's a baby step. That's fine. You might not feel overnight, you might not feel anything different. You might not lose any weight from making that one decision, but you're still making a decision. You're making progress. And so you also have to keep that outcome in a reality. Like focus more on the behaviors than the outcomes. And I think you'll find that you're far more successful in that mentality of paying attention to, man, I was able to give up that thing and I started doing this thing. And when you start paying attention to all the behaviors that you've changed, that's where real success comes in. Not, oh, I lost 50 pounds or I lost 30 pounds. That's great. That's a side effect of all of the behaviors that you've changed.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. That's really where the focus needs to be,
Yeah.
right? Because with every good new decision, they accumulate, and that's how the change happens. That's how the outcome happens.
Yep. I love it. So if people want to learn more about you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
The best way to find me is, well, you can reach out to me at lisagoldbergnutrition.com. And you can also check out my website, lisagoldbergnutrition.com, where I have a free mini course and I have a bunch of free resources that you could download and either, some PDFs, some things to listen to, some things to watch, and they're all free at lisagoldbergnutrition.com.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's always so nice talking about healthy habits and routines and strategies, where people go wrong, where people can go right, and how they can make it really super simple. So thank you so much for sharing all of your information. And for everyone out there listening, be well and thrive, and we'll catch you on future episodes. Thanks for being a faithful listener to the podcast. I'd love it if you left me a 5-star review on this podcast so that others can more easily find this valuable information. Did you know I also work one-on-one with clients? I approach solving health challenges like I approached solving crimes, by conducting a thorough investigation into your case. Sadly, hundreds of millions of people in the US have insulin resistance, prediabetes, and diabetes, and the vast majority have no idea. I'm here to fix that. If you struggle with low energy, stubborn weight, hypertension, sleep disturbances, or any other undesired symptoms, let's talk. All you have to do is schedule a free call. The link will be in the show notes. And no, you do not need to live near me.